Hello. All right. Welcome, everyone. So I'll give this mic. So couple of housekeeping items before we start. Have a seat. Oh, looks like I'm on the other end. So just to kind of, okay. So yeah, couple of housekeeping items before we move. So this is a 45-minute panel discussion. We'll touch upon certain topics in the next 30 minutes, and then we'll open it for Q&A for the audience. For people in the panel, some of the takeaways for you should be, we'll be discussing, like you heard, there are folks who are running active bug bounty programs, who are running bug bounty programs in different capacities, in different kind of industries, etc. So we'll learn from their experiences, we'll hear the challenges, we'll hear the doubts that we keep hearing from a lot of folks in the industry and community, and we'll try to, like, the objective should be that if you're thinking of starting a bug bounty program, or if you're thinking, or if you want to understand what goes behind the scenes, this should be a place for you. And then we also have a slightly different perspective from a consulting, from a product space, wherein working with customers, how Venkatesh might have seen different situations. So, all right, so I'll kick things off. And as the panel says, the title says that, it's learning from the program owners and program managers of bug bounty programs. And Sandesh, I'll come to you first. So since you're a fintech company, recently gone through a lot of bug bounty changes, as we are aware. So can you talk about what prompted your company to start a program?
Yeah. So so at Razorpay, we've been running a bug bounty program for a little over a year now. The first 9 months of that was actually a private program, and a few months ago we went public with the program.
Okay.
And and we were thinking about launching a bug bounty program for at least 6 to 9 months before that.
Okay.
And I think so we've been running a pretty successful responsible vulnerability disclosure program even before that on our website. This is happening for many years at Razorpay. But what we kind of realized is that it was much harder to kind of interact and encourage more researchers to participate, and also like a logistical issue of how do you make payments to a hacker in Paris who reports something, right?
Okay.
It looks very different in a balance sheet, right? Yeah. Somebody did something to you and you paid them money.
Yeah.
It sounds very different outside the security world, right? So we kind of figured out that having an actual program, it streamlines many of those things.
Okay.
And also, of course, having a lot more people look at our platforms makes sense.
Okay.
But we just wanted to make sure we are ready for the avalanche, right?
Okay.
So we decided we want to do it and then spend a few months preparing for it, and then took the plunge.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, continuing on that, Omar, you also have a similar kind of situation and similar kind of program. So I want to understand, in large organization like yours, IKEA, for example, how does this fits into the overall broader cybersecurity strategy? What does the board thinks about bug bounty program? What value is it adding? And what are you trying to where are you trying to go with it?
Yeah, one of the most important thing for IKEA is the people. So, and us as a part of cybersecurity, we are part of the community. We love hackers, we love researchers, and that's something that we want to have close to us. So it was not complicated to have this program. It was quite easy compared to other companies that I have experienced before. And the idea is to approach the community and the hackers and have them in our side. It's much better to be friends of hackers than enemies, right? So
that's a good way of thinking.
Yeah, no, and it's good also to not just having a bug bounty or responsible disclosure as part of your company, but what are the learnings from that? Because every single attack has a different way. So we are learning a lot with each and every report that we are getting. And also this is helping us to develop our capabilities in, for example, our pen test team. So that we can verify those bugs or information in other assets that were not reported before.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. And I think I'll take that to Venki, you as well. Coming from the industry, working so many years, and is there any trend you're seeing these days? How does the bug bounty thing fits into the cybersecurity strategy at the board level or at the leadership level in companies?
I think in India, bug bounty is just in the early. It's just mushrooming right now. There are very few companies who, in India at least, have are running a bug bounty program. But certainly the need for security is the question of how does it have a discussion in the boardroom. Certainly is, I don't have to preach the need for security anymore to anyone in any business. Everybody understands it. But only very few have reached a maturity level to actually run a bug bounty program. But a lot of them are trying to look at tools to do the internal compliance and security assessments themselves.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. And Omar, to your point, I would like to add that, we've worked with some companies wherein they've used the patterns in findings in bug bounty programs to educate their developers by running security, like developer education workshops. And try to fix bug classes just by learning from the patterns that they've seen in their bug bounty programs, combined with security assessments and other things that they've done. And that feeds really well into the whole proactive security side as well. Like you can learn from those things, feed it back to your developers and kind of thing. So yeah, definitely. All right, so I'll come to you, Rishika, now, because you run one of the most challenging programs, I would say, Android chipset program, not an easy kind of, setup kind of thing. So now when things like devices, chipsets, these kind of things come into picture, getting the buy-in becomes like 4 times, 5 times difficult. So how do you convince people to kind of, give you the buy-in for running programs like that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the whole idea is not to just work on Android or secure Android, but the entire ecosystem, right? So when I say chipset vulnerability program, every one of you carrying a phone here has a chip. You might not even know what company is making it and what all vulnerabilities are in there. So that's how we are trying to attack. So when I talk in terms of getting approval from stakeholders, that's the point you need to make, right? We really want to just not focus on web or OS or just Android itself, but actually what happens inside your phone or the hardware or the devices. So we are really trying hard to cover everything to keep the ecosystem secure. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
In a way. And okay, so I think I'll stick to this point a bit because I can sense that there'll be a lot of fear in these kind of scenarios that, okay, if there is a bug that comes in and that disrupts the supply chain of the whole chip ecosystem, that will be a lot of cost. The cost of fixing that bug would be really high. Okay. So does that plays a role when the management gives you a buy-in or like when they're thinking about these programs?
Yeah, definitely. And also because we are not owner of the code. That's the biggest challenge. Like I need to work with Qualcomm, MediaTek, Unisoc to, secure the code. So we just not need buy-in from our stakeholders. We actually need those companies to help us remediate or mitigate if they cannot remediate, right? So yes, I mean, we definitely, it's a big challenging program, but I think it requires everyone's, all the stakeholders' approvals and participation to make it a success.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I have one thing regarding this, because many times we are getting reports that are related to something that we are running, but it's not ours, of course. But one topic that is super important for us is to help researchers to reach out with a real company that is running that. So we are helping and supporting researchers to find out the way and get, for example, the CVE number, the credit for that. So, of course, we need to secure ourselves, but we are helping the researchers to find the way and to communicate with the right company as well. So we are doing like that, man in the middle, let's say.
And that's a really good point, because we've been struggling a bit with this. Is we get a lot of reports for customers. Let's say, for example, Razorpay, an asset owned by Razorpay, which Razorpay does not it's a third-party asset. Now, Razorpay, if there is a 0 day on that, Razorpay cannot do anything, IKEA cannot do anything on that. But we still encourage companies to kind of go to talk to their vendors. That puts a pressure on the vendor to kind of fix because the customer is demanding.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but I look at it a little differently.
Okay, yeah.
So it doesn't matter who owns the code; the risk is still ours.
Yes,
right?
the
So
risk
if
is
you're
still
able to
yours.
exploit a company because of a bug in your supply chain, it's still your risk. So if you look at it from that perspective, it's in the end about risk management. So your risk management can be go fix the code or go talk to a vendor. It's still you got to.
Exactly. So yeah, you're right. We look at it from a risk perspective as well. Like the risk is yours. You should be aware of the risk, and that's why you should be informed of such issues as well. Well, that was good. Now, okay, slightly pivoting now, going on the researcher side, and a big part of running bug bounty programs is working with external researchers. Okay, and we have a lot of security researchers here. Okay, and so I'd like to just start with with all of you in your different capacities, like what your experience has been working with external security researchers. Is there anything that stands out? Is there anything that you'd like to share? Anything surprised you, or like anything that you would like to kind of
yeah, I can go ahead. I think I was telling this to one of our top researchers today. He's sitting there, Aman. Having this transparency about the program, right? Even if we make mistake, it goes in the favor of researchers, right? It's like that. We have values and we stand by those values. And I think I would say keeping researchers happy in different ways there are, of course, but being transparent with them is very, very important, having clear communications and regular communications to make them feel that they are heard, they are listened, and we are keeping in touch with them. That really works for us.
Yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize more on the transparency part. Like hands down, the most important thing that you need in a bug bounty program. Yeah.
My key word is transparency. So it's we need
so we have a second transparency.
So and also another topic that I love the most from this small work in cybersecurity is the opportunity that we have to meet with the researchers, not only in NullCon but in any conference. Researchers are everywhere, and it's super nice to meet the guys face to face and say, so because we have a super close contact with them at the end of the day. So it's they are not our coworkers, but they are part of the whole idea. So it's something brilliant to drive.
No, I think that also plays from a researcher side. I've spoken to a lot of researchers, and they say the more engaged a program is with them, the more they talk to them, the more they feel connected and want to work on those programs. So that definitely plays a role.
Yeah, and one of the things that, for example, in my case, is like there are a lot of communities in the researcher and hacker community. And they are creating the Telegram groups about the bug bounty programs or whatever. And it's a really nice feeling when they are inviting you to one of those to give your input as well from a company perspective, to give advice or support on that. So it's learning as well.
Yeah. So I think, we are very early in the journey compared to, so we have a lot to learn from like Google and IKEA and stuff. Largely our experience has been more positive than we expected. So we expected a lot more resistance and back and forth. So we had some of that, but I think it was largely positive. And I think the one thing we have to figure out as a company or as a community is how much bandwidth can you dedicate to communicating with them, right? So I think that has changed for us over time. So we figured out that there are certain things you can do which means you still communicate at the right space, but there are times when you can back off and not go there. So I think figuring out that kind of balance is really important. And there's always like everyone has a bandwidth all the time. So we'll just have to figure out the balance. But in general, I think the experience, when we were very nervous going in, but we're a lot more relaxed now, 12 months later.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah. Venki, like what have you seen with your customers specifically?
More than my customers, I think foundational as a product owner, a business owner, where the core IP and the capabilities that I'm building in my business is based on researchers. Based on which the product and automation and everything happens. And what me as a founder and business owner drives me is customer wins, revenue, SaaS revenue, gross margin, growth. Security researchers don't care about it. So in a product company, where I'm building this value, significant value based on security researchers, I cannot talk, customer wins and growth doesn't matter. it's all about the new vulnerability that they found out, the new way of doing things. And I think you mentioned about glories, the CVEID and the glory point, right? The glory point wearing that as a badge of honor. So as a product company, there's a different set of challenges that we face, but fundamentally the talent pool that we both get to is the same set of people, security researchers.
And I think
for building product and they for...
I think the responsibility for security products, the bar is higher. Like, when you're trying to secure others, your product should be like very, very secure. And there is a lot of conversation that will be a different panel on that. But yeah, that's a good point. But
I think I'll add just one last thing, right? Other than transparency and everything we talked about, and getting regular feedback, that is super important. I think my mic is breaking every time. Anyways, my voice is super loud, so I can keep. Oh, thank you. So yeah, what I was saying is we really try to get feedback every quarter and then work on that feedback, right? Getting feedback is important, of course, but if you're not working on it, then that doesn't make sense. So that is, again, highly recommended.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen, customers starting programs, and like Sandesh, you mentioned really nicely that companies mature over time. And the only way they can mature is when they have constant feedback. I've seen the way of communication has changed in programs. I've seen the engagement has changed just because of the feedbacks that they've received. So yeah, that definitely transparency, feedback, again, acknowledging researchers as much as possible. Some good points. Yeah. All right. So slightly pivoting, Sandesh, and this would go to you because you're a fairly new program. After starting the bug bounty program, did you find something, and you don't have to talk about the bug itself, but more generally, like, did you find something that was surprising for you from and that kind of, also adds, like, you can add it in a way that it kind of demonstrated the risk in a much more glaring way to the board or to the company leadership. Was there any situation?
Yeah. So a couple, okay. So a couple of points, right? So I think one, and we have a talk about this right after that.
Okay.
So you can hear more about it then. But I think the one thing we kind of found out was there were things auxiliary to the whole vulnerability management program itself, which things like handling traffic and monitoring dashboards going all crazy. When you get these traffic, and how do we manage that? So that was like pretty eye-opening to us. Right? So in our case, like Omar said, convincing the management was not that hard, but convincing our peers in engineering and incident management was hard, because we are like, wait, we are asking people to come do this to us? Like, doesn't make sense, right? So talking to them was interesting. I think that was, so when we went public, we had like a big blip in traffic, and how do we manage that, etc. So that was a big learning for us. On your original question on kind of communicating risk, etc., I think what we essentially did was, for the consumers of the bug, it didn't look any different from what our pen testing bug would look like, right? So we kind of made it simpler for them, because in the end, they were like, it's a security bug, and all the details that you usually get, it doesn't matter. I mean, they knew it came from HackerOne, so because from a bug bounty program, because we tagged it that way. But for them, it didn't make any difference at all, whether it came from here or from there. Right? So it's also
like a mindset thing that you kind of prepared them for. That it's just a bug. Like
it's a bug, and it goes through the same life cycle of the bug. Otherwise, now again, depending on the severity and other things change. But just because it's come from an external researcher doesn't mean much. Now that only works if your teams are cooperative and actually fix stuff. Which luckily our teams do. So we're okay with it. But if it didn't, then we would have had a slightly harder.
And that's a good tangential point to the next question, is because we do have like 10 minutes, and I want to cover this before I go to the last part of it, is like, what preparedness is important for bug bounty programs. And that could be, like you rightly mentioned, when you have a lot of bugs coming in, maybe your internal teams are not ready. And all those. That's just one example, but I'd like to hear from all of you a bit as to, like, what do you think is important in terms of preparedness?
Yeah, one of the most important things is to define properly the scope of the program. So it's super important that, together with a proper process and people, skilled people there, because it doesn't matter if you are getting thousands of reports, if you don't have a proper process to answer the researchers, fix that in a time manner, I would say, providing the information, and also knowing to whom you need to escalate the information or the report stuff. So I would say that those are the most important topics. Another thing is, like, And in the way I want to treat the researchers is that they feel that they are talking always with the same people. So establish guidelines, proper guidelines, and common answers or whatever. It's like in a structured way that they are getting usually the same information, and not just because one engineer left the company. It's totally different the way that they are approaching. So that makes the researchers also to feel happy with you and more comfortable.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Like, maintaining consistency throughout time. So Sandesh.
Yeah, I mean, look, to me, I think it's like any other program management that you do. Right, you need to build contingencies. You need to make sure that you have goals in place, or you have a plan, and then have the ability to change the plan. If things change. So I think the one thing for us is we were kind of hesitating a lot to go public. So in the end, we just said, all right, here are the things we're going to do before we go public, and once we do it, we're going to turn on the tap. That's it, right? So I think having like a rules-based kind of program is better than just saying, hey, we'll do like touchy-feely thing. We'll figure it out when it happens, kind of a thing, right? And of course, I think if you don't have a robust security program already, not a very good idea to go to bug bounty. Like, bug bounty is not a replacement for your pen test program. Right? So I think we kind of make sure. I think that's probably the biggest advice I would give to anyone thinking about starting. You don't want to start with bug bounty.
Can't agree more on that. So
I was going to say the last point. Don't start with the bug bounty. In fact, I have seen many of my customers I talk with, they talk about, we are planning to go down the bug bounty route because that's what I keep hearing. Why should we look at scanning, pen testing, web application firewall, and all these things? And we say that raise the bar on what the bug bounty program and others can find, as opposed to making it too easy for them. So I think you summarize it very beautifully there.
Rishika, anything?
Yeah, sure. I think just like everyone already covered about the scope, but this one thing which is super important is, what is your objective? What are you really wanted to achieve with this particular program? And then I think because everyone already talked about the scope and process and guidelines, it is very, very important to have clearly defined internal, external policies and guidelines. Like, what will you do once you receive the bug, right? You do not want unhappy researchers. So if you receive like 1,000 reports and you don't know how to fix them, then I think by end of the day, then people will just stop coming to your program. So have very clearly defined your objective, scope, how will you assess the reports, how's the severity going to look like. Once you have everything figured out, who's going to remediate the issue, and then finally, how do you release? That's the entire life cycle.
I think, and to add to what Sandesh also said on the program management side, like, be prepared. If you're expecting like hundreds of reports, you should have enough bandwidth to handle those, like, triage, remediate, put them in the bug life cycle and all that. So definitely.
Just like last thought on it. That's why I always recommend, like, start small. If your company makes 10 devices, only do bug bounty for one device, see how it is growing, and then learn from there, and then move on and add more to scope. Do not start with a big scope for bug bounty, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree more. Okay, so before we go to the audience for Q&A, one last question that I've kind of, want to take from you is like, okay, if you have to give one practical piece of advice, let's say I'm a company, reasonably okay security program. I wouldn't say well security program, reasonably okay security program. Do all my SaaS tasks, security assessments, all kind of thing. Decent enough security development. Now I'm thinking of starting a bug bounty program. So what practical advice would you give? 1, 2, anything that any number, for me to start. Rishika, you can start, and then we go back.
One practical advice before you start a bug bounty: find the right researchers, right? You want researchers who would submit good reports. When I say good reports, it should be a great POC. It should have all the reproduction steps. The guy or the team should know what they're doing, because honestly, like when we started, we used to get a lot of junk reports, and then it becomes overwhelming to segregate between good ones and the bad ones. Another suggestion is, while you're launching it on a website or with the rules or whatever, always mention what makes a good report, right? It's very, very required. Like every company has a different requirement. And if you are not clearly defining for the researcher what exactly he should be submitting, then it's waste of time, right? On both ends. So that is very much required.
Added to that, also include information about what is out of the scope in the programs and what are the vulnerabilities that you are not accepting, just to avoid deception from the researchers. And in order to engage them, it's super important to have proper guidelines, playbooks on your site, so you can resolve and provide answers as soon as possible, so they don't need to wait for a long time. Of course, sometimes it's something that is super difficult because mainly with big companies with a huge number of assets, that makes that complicated. But it's an advice that I can give.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have much else. I think start small is a really good point that she made. I think that's probably the most important. And I guess the other thing is just be prepared for your plan to kind of be completely get overturned because of things you didn't see coming. Right. So you need to be nimble and make sure that you have enough contingency to change. But I think there are a lot more things on the technical side, but it depends on what your company does and what your program is. But I think technical controls, monitoring stuff, workflows internally, all those are like really important. But and also, to be honest, I mean, while we say all this, I don't think you need to be like 100% ready. Everything's all go before you start. It's not going to happen. So I mean, I think you need to have like a slightly kind of risk taking.
Like utopia doesn't exist.
So you got to go in thinking it's going to be risky to do this, but there is value at the end of the chain. So
okay, fair enough. Thank you.
I don't run bug bounty programs yet. I work with companies who, because of companies like HackerOne and others talking so highly about the results from the bug bounty program, they read some thing and say that I am looking at this bug bounty program, why do I need you? And I tell them that you need me before the bug bounty program.
Fair enough. That's
big enough, then we will do bug bounty ourselves too for our products.
Absolutely fair point. And I mean, just one piece of thing that I would like to add, and that's slightly technical, is like if you have a bit unconventional scope or where you want the researchers to go when testing your assets, direct them that way. So the way you can direct them is have clear testing plan. Like tell them that, you should go this way, looking for this. This is where we are hosting this. This is where we are doing. Don't let them waste their time in unnecessary areas or at unnecessary places where they have to figure out, or they'll get frustrated or they'll get duplicated and all those kind of things.
So that's a really good point. So we kind of, so Razorpay mostly is used by other businesses. So it's not a consumer facing app. So a lot of the use cases that happen is not obvious to end users. It wasn't obvious to me before I started. So I think luckily we have like really good documentation and stuff, but it's important to point to them to that.
Exactly.
And we kind of, I think if I remember correctly, we saw like a change. So initially for the first few months we had like decent traffic, and then there was a few weeks where we really updated the links to the documents and made sure they had the information, and then we saw higher quality reports kind of coming in a few months more. So so like you said, if you're not a consumer facing company, which is very obvious to all the users, it kind of helps, right? And also our products are very specific to India, so something like PAN verification or some stuff doesn't make sense for most other researchers. So you can actually make it in such a way that you can generalize it and for a global audience. And,
That's a really good one. All right. So I think we are 30 minutes. I think the remaining 15 minutes we want to do open it for questions from the public. So we have the first question and we have the second question. Okay.
To run this bug bounty program, so do you really need to onboard with those platform like BugCrowd or Trust Radius or HackerOne, or because it's cost money, right? So can you start with Nimble, maybe something on your own, or what's the experience or what's the suggestions around that?
It helps. Of course, that helps because you will have a platform to deal with. You don't need to break your head with the payments and all that stuff, because at the end it depends on what is your scope and the people that you want to submit the stuff. But if it's worldwide, then definitely that's an important topic to go with the platform. I had experience from the previous years to running that without a platform, and I was mentioning before the meeting that was the first day that we opened that. We got 2,500 emails regarding vulnerabilities. So it was OTRS system, ticketing system, and it was super hard to manage that in on that way. So
Yeah, I mean, you could probably start with like a responsible vulnerability disclosure on your page. And then if you want to really test your waters, you can start handing out bounties. You don't have to commit to it, but you can if somebody goes in a really good report, you can find a way to give them bounties, right? But like you said, if it's like a cross-border payment, then, your finance team is not going to be happy, like sending money abroad, right? And, initially the response to that was, hey, we'll just still send swag, right? And then we started this program in COVID, and shipping stuff was a nightmare during COVID. Right. So we didn't have that option either. Right. So I think is it possible? Yes. But you really need to do the trade-off between the effort versus the platform fee. Right. Yeah.
And yeah. Okay. We do have three. The gentleman second last row for here.
One last thing I would add is start a private. You don't have to go public right away. I would highly recommend going private until your company is ready to go public. And that can take from 2 months to 2 years. It depends. Every company is different. Yes. The private means you only make it invite only. So you actually, work with different companies like HackerOne or BugCrowd and Bugbase, and then work with them to make it invite only in terms of their top researchers can only come and submit.
And I think representing a platform, I would also say that, yes, there is no mandate to using a platform. If you are confident you have the resources and you're able to do it, if you have the team enough to do it, you can do it on your own. There is no the researchers are going to be the same out there, kind of. So yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Hi. So I have a question around the budget of bug bounty program. Like, what if many good bugs are reported within a certain period of time, and there might be budget constraints. So how do you think about it as program managers?
That's a good question. Yeah. Who wants to take it?
No one can.
No one wants to talk about money, right?
She doesn't have that problem. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, it's a really good question. I think, look, it's the same question you have with anything where you're consuming stuff, right? So it's a consumption thing. If you run out of budget, you need to have, if you can calculate your burn rate and make sure, on an average, you're giving out X dollars worth of bounty and you have like 4X remaining in your balance, then that's where you start your conversation with your finance team, right? Like that's kind of the way to do it. And if you really are kind of lowering down, and then you got to see why this is happening in the first place, right? Maybe your bounty amounts are too high. Maybe you haven't actually done security assessments on your program.
Yeah.
By the way, cost per bug bounties are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Right? Your internal team or SaaS tool finding a bug is a lot cheaper than paying a researcher to do it. So I think in the larger question there is, why did this happen? That's one. And second is avoid surprises. Like just make sure that you have enough in your pool for the next few months before you have that conversation, right? And I think that's the short answer.
Yeah.
But in reality, yeah, you're right. But that's true of everything, right? Like, if when you're running, he can tell you more. He runs a company, right? Going over budget is a common thing. And most seasoned managers know how to kind of figure it out in general.
Yeah.
I think it's a consumption thing, and you have to balance it based on your need and budget, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think.
Hi.
Yeah, we can have that.
So, question to the panelists: have you ever faced a situation where running a bug bounty program ended up breaking the environment, or maybe losing some sensitive data in the hand of the researchers? So how do you deal with those situations? And if we take a step back, then in the first place, how do you take precautions to avoid those situations?
I can go next.
Yeah, Google is very, very secure in terms of who have access. So to answer your question, we have not been into a situation where people can get in or lose stuff. I will answer it differently. When people report a bug that can make this kind of stuff happen, it's definitely a critical kind of severity issue. So all of our teams just jump on it, and that's the P1 of that particular day. That's how we resolve it or whatnot. So access management is, I guess, every company's biggest challenge. And in terms of if someone is reporting it in that sense, like you mentioned, then again, that's the first thing you do that particular day. And then definitely reward the researcher the amount he, basically deserves.
Yeah.
I'll pass on to others.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I'll generalize the response by saying that unexpected things happen and you have to be ready for it. It may not be like access to sensitive data. Like I said, we have a talk coming up about exactly that, but we saw a lot more traffic than we expected and we had to deal with it in an automated manner, right? So yeah, so unexpected things happen and you have to be ready for it. But yeah, I haven't dealt with that particular scenario that you mentioned. Yeah.
I would like to add that in many cases, usually the researchers know where to stop as well. So you can find sensitive information and you have the opportunity to exploit that and try to get the data, whatever, or just inform the companies about some species. I do recommend to do that because a lot of companies are taking that very seriously, and they don't want the researchers to dig in on the information or whatever. So it's general recommendation. So
Yeah.
sorry.
Do you take any precautions to avoid those situations?
Yeah, of course. That's part of our job. So cybersecurity, we need to protect our companies. That's but you never know.
The usual SOC operations, you mean?
Sir?
The usual SOC operations.
Yeah.
The question has somehow been resonated and half of it has been answered. But I would just like to understand how the organization, if we are having a specific dedicated bug bounty program for an organization, how we can ensure that the data leakage is not happening and we have a proper data privacy in line with the bug bounty program. As already discussed in the panel, we have had discussions about risk assessment, the risk categorization and the bug bounty program. So how data privacy, specifically GDPR, align with the bug bounty program? And how are the measures, again, answered, but to an extent, how are they taken care as a part of risk assessment with the dedicated bug bounty program in a security organization? Thank you.
Yeah, I can talk in what we are doing. And when we started working on this, one of the first things that we made was contact with the legal team and the privacy team to make sure that we had in a written way all the things that the researcher has not or is not able to do, right? Regarding the GDPR and all that is part of the SLAs that we have in this case or in our own site. But also with the HackerOne. And in the case that someone bypasses that and does something that it's not expected or should not do that, then the legal team will start working on that.
And just to add to that, right, if the whole premise of a bug bounty program, or to an extent the pen testing program, is that if your bug bounty hunter doesn't do that or you stop them from doing it, the hackers will. So you'll have to deal with it anyway, right? So the question is, do you want to do it within a controlled manner with bug bounty programs and security programs, or do you want to deal with it when an incident happens? So in a way, I would say this prepares you for that eventuality as well, right? So yeah, so however you would treat your, incident management program, it's a lighter version of it without the impact. So you'll have to kind of like just deal with it that way.
Yeah.
Hi. So, during the COVID time, there were many financial constraints, and even for the security researchers, they started doing bug bounty very aggressively during the COVID time. I'm pretty sure the reports and the traffic will be really extreme. What kind of problems did the program managers faced during the COVID time, or still just being faced from your POV?
Well, in our case, we didn't saw an increase on the number of reports but we had that average number from a long time. And we didn't suffer any issue or complication regarding that. So.
I think on our end, we definitely see a spike. Also, not just COVID, we always see spike during holiday season, where it's like most of the researchers have double jobs, right? They'd love to do whatever job they do, and then this they do for passion. Every time we see a spike, there is a direct impact to our vulnerability management team, our internal feature remediation team, and then that's what a program manager would consider. If you see a spike, how will you change the number of people who are working on those bugs, right? Because at end of the day, you don't want researchers to be left hanging like nobody's responding, right? Overall recommendation, if you see some spike like that, it's always, like I said, right, transparency. You have a choice to go on the website and mention it, that we are seeing a spike because of XYZ, our response will be delayed by X number of days or whatever. So that's really helpful. So researchers know that people are looking, but it's going to take some time to respond back. Did I answer your question? Anything follow up? I'll pass on to others.
Okay. This is the last question we'll take. We are short of time, so 3 minutes left. The last question.
Thanks for that. How does the leadership and the governance committees and the enterprise risk committees that you would have leverage this particular program to kind of decide on the overall strategy and the how is it kind of meeting the business objectives particularly, because at one point in time, they are kind of, blessing the program, right, by funding it. But then in the long term, how do they see value in it? What are the kind of things that they kind of, that they look out for, and, what kind of questions come to you guys particularly?
I'll take a quick answer before I pass on to others. So Google, of course, big organization, and I only manage a small program, which is Android VRP. And then if you see, Google has multiple products and every product has their own VRP. The reason for that is because we see value. If I am doing it and I recommend another sister team in the company to do it, they will ask me the same question, right? What was the benefit or what did you learn? As Android or Android chipset VRP, we definitely get a lot of critical bugs, which we might not have found any other way. And that's the kind of report we present to the management, showing them we couldn't have get this before if we don't have a VRP program. So I guess we are fairly a larger organization and we see a lot of value, but I definitely would pass on to these guys, like, if they see those challenges.
Yeah, at the end, when you have a bug bounty program or responsible disclosure program, you have your assets exposed, and the information that or the reports that you will get from the researchers is the same that hackers, bad guys, sorry, not using hackers, bad guys, could use even to exploit your company. So in our case, we had fully support from the company. They understood quite in a natural way and common sense. And as I said before, we are part of the community. So we got the support and it was super easy. I cannot complain about that.
Yeah. So I think, as someone who manages security, generally defining ROI for security is hard, right? In general, it's hard. Bug bounties is among the easiest because you only pay when you find a bug. Right. Yeah. So the idea is that, like, hey, why did you just spend whatever X number of dollars? Because we found X by 5 bugs. Right. Yeah. And if you don't find bugs, you don't pay the money. Right. So I think the ROI discussion is actually extremely simple in bug bounties. Not so much when you want to buy like a big enterprise tool to scan your code and things like that. There, it's a lot harder to convince people. So I would say that is probably not a big concern. The bigger concern is like communication and how do you handle that and all that. But ROI is fairly straightforward here because you pay for what you get. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And those who still have questions and we've not even able to take it, will be around. So outside you can catch us and any of the panelists, and feel free to ask things that you still want answered. With that, I'd like to thank everyone, Rishika, Omar, Sandesh, Venki. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope this was useful for all of you. You got some perspectives, fresh perspectives as to how you can look at starting a bug bounty program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.